Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is going to be a continuation of the original video that I created, which I titled Private Pilot Oral Guidelines Series 1. This is a continuation of Task A of the PTS. And the PTS, you could research it online. It's for free by going into the FAA website and typing in the search engine FAA-8081-15 alpha, or you can just put that in Google and you'll be able to get a nice document. I like to work on that copy better because when I print it out, I have space on the corners and I could put my little notations and say, okay, this is most likely the questions that I'm going to be asked in reference to the actual subject matter. So we're going to get right into it. If you look at Task A, certification documentations. Number 2 says locating and explaining what is the airworthiness certificate, registration, operating limitations, placards, instrument marking, and POH. Weight and balance data and equipment list. So those are the three general questions areas that you're going to be getting. So when it comes to the A, which is going to be airworthiness and registration certificates, the questions are going to be as follow. What are the required documents that you must have on board the aircraft? And this is where the famous word arrow comes into mind. You say arrow. A for airworthiness certificate, R for registration, O for operating handbook, and W for weight and balance. So remember, those are some of the questions. Now let's talk a little bit about it. So when it comes to the airworthiness certificate, another question could be, does it have to be visible? Yes, and the answer is yes. It has to be visible to your passenger because what the airworthiness certificate is doing is assuring that the aircraft is airworthy to a passenger. That means that it has received the proper 100-hour inspection if it's for hire or if it's an annual inspection as well. So remember, that's what it's saying. That's why it has to be visible. You don't have to, if you go into a check ride and the airworthiness certificate is behind the actual registration, that's not a good sign because you should be visible to the examiner or anybody in that aircraft. Now, when it comes to the question is going to be asked, does it expire? And the answer is yes, it expires every 3 years. All right. Another question that I received in the past is, okay, have you ever seen a pink registration? And I say, because I've never seen one. Um, but when it comes to the registration being pink, it means that it's a temporary registration. You'll get that with new production aircraft. So just remember, if you do see a pink one, it tends to be a temporary one. Now, when it comes to operating limits, placards, instrument markings, and POH, all the questions related to that are going to be coming from your limitations portion of your POH, so which is going to be number 2. And number 2 is pretty much for every aircraft, every helicopter handbook that I know of anyway. You'll find it at Section 2. Section 2 deals with limitations, right? So if you open up Section 2, you'll get all the limitation possible questions that you're going to get. For example, if you're flying the Robbie, like I do and I teach, you should know the limitations for your tech, right? Whenever you're flying with power on versus whenever you're doing an auto rotation, which is compared power off. So for example, when you're flying with power on, which means the gauges are crossed, for a regular beta is between 97% and 104. For a beta 2, 101 to 104. Depending on which model you're bringing to the test, that's the one that you need to emphasize on. So if you and whatever it is, remember, you gotta know those numbers. I mean, you should know those numbers. And then for power off or doing an auto rotation practice, what are your ranges, right? It's from 90% to 110. Now remember, 110 is also a red line, so it's considered, you could possibly overspeed the rotor system, but it kind of gives you that range. You don't want to hit the top range too much, and you don't want to hit the low range, but you want to be in between that range. Obviously, that's why whenever you're doing auto rotation, I'm pretty sure your instructor is training you to keep it at 97%. And the reason why we want to keep you at 97% is because of that flare. When you flare that helicopter, what happens to that needle? It just jumps up, right? So that's the reason why we like to keep it on the 97%. I like to also keep it almost at 95 sometimes, but right at 97 because you could flare that helicopter really hard and Obviously depending on how gusty the winds are, it's going to jump up a lot faster, but it really helps out with that flare. So now, when we're talking about the actual placards are pretty much a bunch of little stickers throughout the aircraft. And the stickers are there to tell you the limitations, for example, of the actual fuel tanks. If you go into the fuel tanks, okay, the fuel tanks under limitation, okay, is going to tell you that the main is going to have a fuel capacity of it's going to be 19.2. All right. I mean, and the auxiliary, I believe, is 10.8. So those are the actual limitations, and you'll be able to find that under 2-7. All right. So where it says right here, you'll be able to notice it. It'll tell you pretty much main, 19.2 for usable capacity, which is what you really care about, right? What am I going to be able to use? And for the auxiliary, which is 10.5. For the total, okay, for the main is going to be 19.8, and for the auxiliary is going to be 10.9. So, for example, and the reason why you want to know that is very important, because this is going to tell you the endurance of your aircraft, right? Because the headwind determines the speed at which you're going to get there. Right? So if you have a headwind that's 5 knots versus a headwind that's 10 knots, it's going to determine how long it's going to take you to get there. So you need to have enough fuel to get to your destination. Obviously, we all love tailwinds, right? Because tailwinds push us into our destination, so it requires less fuel, less effort. You just gotta find it and just kind of go with it. So that is one of the limitations that you'll find. It's gonna tell you limitations about the fuel, different type of fuels that the helicopter takes. 100 low lead. You should know that's the ones that are recommended. It's gonna tell you about low G's prohibited, which touches into SFAR 73. It's gonna tell you the limitations of it's gonna give you the weight and balance of it, and this is where that little chart that you don't know if you guys ever seen it, that you get from the flight school that they create. This is where everything is created. It comes from the limitations. It's gonna tell you about the seating, the maximum weight allowable on the aircraft, minimum weight versus maximum weight. Like, for example, the minimum weight is gonna be like, one of the questions that I received is like, why do we get a minimum weight? Why do the manufacturer put a minimum weight? And you figure, minimum weight means, wow, the less weight I have, the more I could carry, right? The more payload I could carry. So you say to yourself, why is that? Well, the reason that is that because of auto rotation. If we don't have enough weight in the aircraft, we cannot get those rotors spinning fast enough to allow us to flare at the bottom during our rotation. They're just not going to have enough inertia. You can't build it up. Because remember, all our energy is stored in our forward momentum in the R22 and R44. Okay, so the same thing comes with a maximum weight, right? Why do we have a maximum weight? Well, maximum weight has to do with excessive coning, right? Because if you too much weight, it's going to cone up, right? And so to a point, it's going to cone like this. Now, are we creating lift? Absolutely not, right? So the coning is the reason why there is a maximum weight. So now you know the minimum and the maximum. And one thing I learned about flying, it's like cooking. To me, it's just like cooking, because you gotta get the formula right. It's just, when you put in salt, how much salt? No, it has to be just enough. Because if you put too much salt on something, it's awful. And if it's not enough, it destroys the whole meal. But when it's perfect, that is the way you're being trained by your instructor. That's why your instructors are constantly drilling you. They're trying to get you to that point where you kind of be able to create your own recipe, and once you get your own recipe, you got it all figured out. But the whole thing about the instructor, our job is to provide that guideline. The manufacturer gives us that guideline, we pass it on to you, and then your job is to grow with that guideline and even expand on it a lot more. Those guidelines are there for your safety, and that's why the manufacturer says that limitation portion. So definitely, when you go into your check ride, make sure you know your limitations very well. Obviously, the emergency procedures are exactly what they are. you should know them, right? You should know your maximum glide, how to configuration. You should know, you know, um, how to internal rotation. You should know, you know, everything about the emergency procedures, which is section 3. You should pretty much, it should be like in the back of your mind. This is something because if it does happen, God forbid, you don't have time to think. You just have to react, and that's what the whole point of doing so many auto rotations, so many emergency procedures, because those you do it so much that after a while you don't even think about it. You just know what to do. You just hear the sound and boom, you'll do it. And let me tell you guys, for for those who have doubts whenever you're doing autos, I did too at the beginning, and I was doing them, but whenever you have to do an auto or whenever you hear something weird, you are going to just do it. I mean, it just comes in, and you'll be like, wow, you won't even think about it until everything is done. And that's one of the things that I like to teach. I like to teach throttle chops. Now, if you are an instructor and you are teaching throttle chop, just make sure, please make sure, that the cruise is about 70 knots. You don't want to have a high cruise. Because you won't be able to roll that throttle fast enough. And make sure that your right leg, okay, your right leg is just literally on top of that right pedal, okay. Make sure that's there, just in case the student presses the wrong pedal. So just make sure that that leg is right in there, because the student would tend to do the opposite of what they're supposed to do. But it's good to experience it as a student, and it's also good as an instructor. Just make sure your guidelines and be quick to take over the aircraft. If you are going to teach that maneuver, I personally recommend know your guidelines and know exactly when you're going to recover. Okay, we all have different times. I'm not going to give you a time but my thing is like I just look at the tech and I say I want to see how long this guy is going to take to recover. Okay, and literally I give my students 1 second. You have 1 second to recover, because you should be able, because that's how fast you should be able to move. I mean, I grab that throttle and I make sure that, as I'm doing it, and like I said, make sure that that speed is low. You don't want to have very high speed. You don't want to pull a lot of inches, okay? Less than 20 inches. You could keep reaching about 70 knots, 65 knots. 70 inches is great. I'm sorry, 20 inches is great. Don't push it past 20, 22. 21 might be the limit for me personally. Everybody has their limits, but if you are going to practice this with your students, practice it at 20 inches or less, and you'll be able to recover. Because the reason why those inches are very important for you as an instructor is that, remember, that needle is just going to drop. so so you will experience the difference between this needle when you're splitting at 21 or 22 inches versus at 17 inches. Now, I learned this from going to the Robinson factory, and I advise everyone to go to that factory, so those guys could really show you how fast that needle goes down. So you could have an understanding, say, oh my God, this is why I have to lower that collector. This is why I got to go off cycling, because when I lower that collector, if I'm already going to be close to 90, if I have a throttle chop situation, I just lose my engine. So I got to regain those RPMs. First RPMs, then pitch for whatever you have to go. Pitch for 60, then look for a spot. That's kind of like the order. That's why when you're flying, try to always fly from, I used to call it, I fly from spot to spot. I go, so I don't have to never think about going to a spot. I already have predetermined my spot. And thank God I never had to use my theory. And I hope you guys never have to do it as well. Now, we're going to talk about a little bit more about the actual placards. And like I said, those are little stickers that are there to, as you're doing your pre-flight inspection, they should be throughout the entire aircraft. All right. And obviously, when you're going to talk a little bit about weight and balance now, which is the last part of it, the weight and balance, you should kind of know your weight and balance like the back of your hand. Because whenever I have gone to the check ride, I tend to bring it ready, but my examiner is expecting for me to be able to explain to him how I came up with this calculation. For example, the formula we know is weight times an arm equals a moment. That is the basic of it, right? And then to get the CG is going to be moment total moment divided by total weight. So in the R-22 or air helicopter, we're going to get two CGs, one for when we have full fuel and another one when we have no fuel. Because we want to see how our CG is going to be moving from full fuel to no fuel. So as that CG is moving this way, we want to see the reaction. And the reason why it moves forward, so as it starts to move forward, is because, think about it. As you're putting fuel, and fuel is calculated for the R-22 for the 100 lower lead at 6 pounds per gallon, right? As you're putting fuel in the back of that aircraft, okay, the back of it is heavier maybe than the front, assuming that you don't weigh as much. Let's suppose you're right at the envelope, which is 130. And that's why whenever you guys have ever flown solo, have you noticed it's like you're flying in a recliner, and it's such a weird experience. Me as an instructor, having to sign people off is, it's kind of weird. That's why we want you to get that pick up and set down perfect, because when you are flying by yourself, it's going to be so much different. And the only thing that's going to help you control that aircraft is having the actual skill there, because it doesn't matter. You're just kind of going to fly like this. And that's why if you notice, if you're flying solo, where's that cyclic? That cyclic, you have to push it all the way forward to try to compensate for that weight in the back. And as let's suppose you do a long cross country. Let's say you fly for 1 hour and a half, or 1 hour, or 40 minutes. At the end of your flight, that cyclic gets closer to your chest. Why? Because you're burning all that fuel in the back. So now the front becomes heavier. Now, when we're flying with 2 passengers, no issue, right? So that's one of the things that you're expected to understand your weight imbalance, to know how your aircraft is going to react. So one of the questions is, okay, which direction is the CG moving? You're going to say it's moving from back to the front. Why? Because as I burn fuel in the back, the front becomes heavier. Okay, so that is one reason for the weight imbalance, to know which way is moving. Because guess what? Once again, about flying helicopters, if you don't have enough weight in the front of it, that front CG, what's going to happen? If God forbid you get into engine failure, you'll be able to get in there. You'll be able to do acyclic and get those rotor RPMs, to the level that they should within operating range. Okay, 90 between, actually right at 97. That's the number. And as you're coming down, and now you're like, oh wow, beautiful rotation. You got the spot. Now it's time to flare. Guess what? As you flare that helicopter, you're able to flare it. And then once you have to level it, you won't have enough cyclic to level it. That's why you gotta make sure, and vice versa. You have to be able to know the limits, and is it within those range, because that's what you need, especially with the lateral, okay? The reason why we sit on the right seat on the aircraft, okay, of the R-22, is because the fuel tank is on the left, all right, the main. So it's assuming that the auxiliary is not there, because the auxiliary is an optional fuel tank. And if you notice, the size of the auxiliary is half the size of the main. So just think about it. If you don't have the auxiliary and you sit yourself on the left seat because you want to sit on the left seat, and then you fill up that tank all the way up, and let's suppose you want to take someone who's 90 pounds, okay, who is less than you, let's suppose you weigh 200 pounds, that is a sign for catastrophe. You're going to be, as soon as you take off, the aircraft is going to want to go like this. So you got to make sure that you understand your weight imbalance, and this is what the examiner is expecting you to understand. Not to memorize all those numbers, understand why those numbers are the way they are. And obviously the questions are going to be, okay, what is empty weight? Includes the aircraft structure, power plant requirement, the requirements as specified by the POH. Excludes fuel and payload, weight of occupants, cargo and baggage, weight, gross weight, basic empty weight plus the useful load, maximum gross weight, maximum allowable operation weights of the aircraft, right? Useful load, maximum gross weight minus basic empty weight. So, like I said, I hope the words that I said in this presentation, I hope it is helping you understand a little bit better, and to kind of give you an idea of what everybody's looking for you as a newly probably pilot. And I hope for all of you as instructors, just to make sure that you're drilling on some of those values that I'm pretty sure your instructor put onto you, and then now it's your job to pass it on to your students. So next time, this is actually we have completed the task A of my series. So in later documents, I may come up and expand on it. You're welcome to send me any type of email, and I will love to help you out in response. It's like I tell all my students for free, and I just love aviation, and this is the reason why I'm spending the time to talk to you. All right, take care and see you next time. Remember, your instructor believes in you. I believe in you. You have to believe in yourself, but remember, you got this. You study hard, and if you're watching this video, it's because you're definitely searching for knowledge. You're definitely improving on your skills, and you are going to definitely get there. All right, take care.